You see, the world isn't what it used to be. There was a time when dominance was taken for granted, when one voice spoke and the rest followed. But times have changed, and one of the biggest reasons for that change is the rise of India. Now, let's be clear, we're not talking about a temporary burst of growth. We're talking about a movement, a transformation, a shift in global energy, and make no mistake about it. Donald Trump sees it. And he fears it because what's happening in India right now, that's the kind of growth that shakes the foundation of old power structures. India's not just growing economically, it's evolving strategically, politically, culturally, and it's doing it without asking for permission. Now you may wonder, why would a man like Trump, who prides himself on being tough, bold, unapologetic, why would he be afraid? The answer is simple. It's about control. It's about the fear of losing the upper hand. For decades, the United States has positioned itself as the center of global decision-making. But India isn't waiting for anyone to hand it a seat at the table. It's building its own damn table. Take a look at India's global posture today. It's engaging with Russia, with the West, with the Middle East. It's signing trade agreements, building strategic defense partnerships, investing in Africa, and shaping global digital norms. And all the while, it's maintaining a firm, independent voice. That independence, that refusal to fall in line, that's what unsettles Trump the most. Because in Trump's world, loyalty is currency, but India isn't playing that game. India plays chess while Trump is still shouting over checkers. Think back to Trump's administration, when India made its own decisions about oil imports, about defense systems, about dealing with its neighbors. It didn't always align with what Washington wanted. Trump, a man used to calling the shots, saw a country that wouldn't fold, that wouldn't be strong, armed, and that's when respect turns to worry. That's when admiration turns to anxiety. You see, Trump doesn't just fear economic growth. He fears sovereign strength. He fears a rising power that doesn't need validation from the West to lead. And India, it's becoming that power. It's not asking for recognition, it's earning it. Through technology, through diplomacy, through its massive influence in the global South. And let's not forget, India isn't just rising in power, it's rising in narrative. The story of the next generation might not start in New York or D.C. It might begin in Mumbai, in Delhi, in Bengaluru. And for a man obsessed with image, with legacy, with being the center of the story, there's nothing more threatening than realizing he might not be the main character anymore. So, when we talk about why Donald Trump is afraid of India's growth, it's not just about economics or policy or politics. It's about power, it's about identity, and it's about a global order that's shifting, whether he likes it or not. India's growth is not a threat to the world, but it is a reality check for those who've grown too comfortable with control. There's something happening in the global economy that you can't ignore. No matter how loud you shout, no matter how many walls you build, or how many slogans you repeat, the rules of the game are changing. And Donald Trump, he knows it, he feels it, because for a man who's built his brand on the image of American dominance, economic, political, cultural, the rise of a country like India signals a new game entirely. One where the old tools don't work. One where the U.S. can no longer assume it's the only player that matters. And that kind of shift, that rattles someone like Trump to his core. Now, let's talk about why this isn't just a bump in the road. It's a realignment. India is no longer just participating in the global economy. It's helping write the rules. Digital infrastructure, fintech, mobile payment. India isn't following behind Silicon Valley. It's leading its own revolution. When a rickshaw driver in a small village can accept payments through a QR code faster than someone in a New York deli, that's not coincidence. That's a shift in innovation. That's disruption with a purpose. And when you're someone like Trump, who sees tech as a trophy of American greatness, seeing that edge move elsewhere feels like losing the very thing you brag about at rallies. Trump isn't just watching jobs move. He's watching influence move, control move, and he's not used to that. Because for decades, America was the unquestioned headquarters of economic thought, technological development, and entrepreneurial swagger. But now, you've got Indian companies competing head-to-head with you. As giants, you've got startups going global straight from Indian soil. And more importantly, you've got a whole generation of Indian youth who don't see the West as the final destination. They see it as just one of many options. It's not just about what India is doing. It's how it's doing it, strategically, domestically, with a confidence that doesn't need approval. While Trump was busy picking trade wars and throwing tariffs like tantrums, India was negotiating smartly. Quietly building resilience, diversifying supply chains. And now, when the world talks about the future of manufacturing, of AI, of digital public goods, India's name isn't just mentioned, it's at the center. That scares Trump because he doesn't fear a fight. He fears becoming irrelevant, and there's another layer here. Trump's whole persona is built on the idea of control, command, being the loudest voice in the room. But how do you control something you don't understand? How do you push back against a force that isn't trying to replace you, but simply to outgrow you? India isn't playing America's game. It's building a new one. And Trump, who thrived in the old playbook, realizes he's not equipped for the new one. See, it's easy to mock rivals who are behind. It's easy to laugh off countries that haven't caught up. But what do you do when they pass you by? When they stop asking for validation and start setting the pace? That's the question Trump is wrestling with. Because every time India launches another satellite, signs another trade deal, or builds another unicorn startup, it's not just a win for India, it's a loss of leverage for him. So let's not kid ourselves. The fear isn't just about economics. It's about control slipping away, influence shifting, and a future that no longer revolves around just one voice. You can tell a lot about a man by what makes him nervous. Not by what he says in front of the cameras, not by what he posts at 2 a.m., but by what he avoids, what he sidesteps, what he tries to downplay. And when it comes to India's technology sector, its relentless, brilliant, unstoppable momentum, Donald Trump knows he's looking at a future that doesn't include him at the center of the frame. That's not just uncomfortable for him, that's terrifying. Because when power shifts from one place to another, it doesn't ask for permission. It moves quietly, confidently, and it changes everything in its path. That's what India's tech rise is doing. Now, Trump has always framed America as the land of ultimate innovation. He talks about the Silicon Valley legends, the great American companies, the genius of U.S. entrepreneurship. But while he's reminiscing about the past, India is living in the future. Cities like Bengaluru and Hyderabad aren't just keeping pace. They're creating a rhythm of their own. Global companies are setting up shop in India not just to cut costs, but to tap talent. Indian engineers, developers, designers. They're not just contributing to the global digital economy, they're leading it. And for someone like Trump, who equates leadership with dominance, watching that leadership being shared, or even challenged, doesn't sit easy. Let's break this down even further. During Trump's presidency, he pushed the America First doctrine like a sales pitch. But what he didn't account for was that the world was no longer waiting in line. Countries like India weren't trying to be second. They were building their own way forward. Indian startups exploded in number and ambition. From edtech to health tech, from logistics to AI, Indian entrepreneurs weren't just copying the West. They were solving uniquely Indian problems with scalable global solutions. That's innovation at its rawest. And it's coming from a place Trump never expected to compete with. And it's not just the quantity, it's the quality. India is producing CTOs, and founders who are reshaping global markets. Just look at the names leading some of America's biggest companies: Google, Microsoft, IBM, Adobe. These aren't just success stories. They're signals. Signals that talent knows no borders, and that the future of tech leadership isn't tied to any one country, especially not one clinging to the past. For Trump, who built his image on national pride and superiority, this kind of global interdependence feels like a threat. But it's not a threat to the world. It's only a threat to the illusion of total control. See, Trump talks a lot about making America great again, but what he won't talk about is what happens when other nations are already becoming great, on their own terms. India's digital public infrastructure, the speed of innovation in fintech, the scale of mobile penetration, these aren't side stories. They're redefining how societies function. While Trump plays politics with old factories and forgotten industries, India is investing in coding boot camps, STEM education, and next-gen startups. One is clinging to nostalgia. The other is building a new world. And maybe that's what scares him most, because Trump doesn't just want to lead, he wants the world to need him. But India's tech rise says otherwise. It says, we've got our own route, our own code, our own future. That kind of independence doesn't bow. It doesn't wait, and it certainly doesn't fear outdated slogans. It just keeps building, and that's what's really hard for him to swallow. Control, that's the word, that's the addiction. For someone like Donald Trump, control isn't just a tool, it's the identity. He built his image on being the boss, the deal maker, the one who walks into the room and says, here's how it's gonna go. But what happens when a country doesn't flinch, doesn't fold, doesn't play along with the script? That's where India comes in. Because in a world where too many nations bend under pressure, India has learned to walk tall, and alone if it must. That's not defiance for the sake of drama. That's geopolitical independence. And that's what truly unsettles Trump. See, Trump comes from an era of transactional politics. You give me this, I give you that. You support me on the global stage, I'll give you a photo op and maybe a trade deal. It's all about leverage, about using America's weight to tilt the table. And for a long time, that worked. Many countries followed the lead because they needed to. But India's posture has always been different. It doesn't rush into alliances, it calculates. It doesn't bark back, it simply acts quietly, intelligently, strategically. That unnerves someone like Trump, who's used to immediate compliance or loud confrontation. He doesn't know what to do with steady silence and firm resolve. Think about how India handles its foreign relations. It's not blindly aligned with the U.S., nor is it a puppet for any other power. It buys oil from who it needs to. It chooses its defense partners based on its own interests. It stands with the global South, not just because of history, but because it understands what it means to lead through solidarity instead of subservience. That's a different kind of power, not flashy, not loud, but deeply rooted, and it's hard to shake. That's why when Trump tried to push on issues, whether trade imbalances, defense contracts, or strategic alignment, India didn't jump. It pushed back, with calm, with data, with its own terms. Now, Trump's instinct is to dominate the conversation. But India doesn't need to talk big to play big. When it makes moves, on the border, in the Indo-Pacific, or through BRICS and G20 diplomacy, it does so with one eye on sovereignty and the other on long-term vision. It's not interested in being the favorite student. It's focused on being the teacher of its own destiny, that kind of confidence that doesn't play well with Trump's style, because it removes the very thing he craves most, predictability under pressure. This independence also means India won't always agree with the U.S., and it doesn't pretend to. It walks its own diplomatic path, even when it's unpopular. And that sends a clear message to Washington. You can no longer assume that your priorities are everyone's priorities. Trump may have used tariffs and Twitter to punish those who didn't fall in line, but India simply weathered the noise, because its power isn't built on shouting. It's built on staying the course. And here's the real issue for Trump. He doesn't fear enemies. He knows how to fight those. What he fears is a partner who's too strong to control, but too important to ignore. That's India, a country that will sit at the table, speak its mind, and walk away if it must. No begging, no pleading, just presence. And that, more than anything, is what makes Trump uncomfortable. Because in that quiet strength, he sees a future he can't dominate. That kind of independence. It doesn't need permission to rise. Democracy is a word that gets thrown around a lot, especially by people who want to wear it like a badge while bending its rules behind closed doors. Donald Trump talks about democracy like it's a brand he owns, like it's a weapon he can use to point fingers at other countries when it suits his narrative. But here's the truth. India is the world's largest democracy, not in theory, in numbers, in scale, in diversity, in chaos and beauty and disagreement and resilience, and that reality, that a democracy with over 1 billion voices, dozens of languages, and centuries of complexity can stand tall and define its own destiny. That shakes Trump's world, because in his mind, power only looks one way, sounds one way, operates on his terms. But India's version of democracy, it doesn't ask for his approval. It thrives on its own. Now, Trump's idea of democracy is transactional. It's tied to loyalty, to image, to applause. He sees elections as contests of ego, not expressions of will. He divides people to rule them. But in India, democracy is messy and real. It's not perfect, but it's alive. It pulses through every street protest, every village council, every social media debate. It's not about making the loudest voice the winner. It's about managing contradiction, complexity, contradiction again, and still choosing the ballot over the bullet. That kind of living, breathing democratic process that doesn't just challenge Trump, it exposes him. Because let's be honest, Trump doesn't fear India because it's chaotic. He fears it because it works despite the chaos. He fears a country that can argue all day and still show up in record numbers to vote. A country that balances religion, caste, class, and region, and still marches forward. That kind of democratic strength doesn't depend on one man, one party, or one ideology. It depends on the people. And the moment Trump sees a system he can't manipulate with slogans or tweets, he sees a threat not to America, but to his version of power. India's growth isn't just technological or economic, it's ideological. It's showing the world that you don't need to be Western to be modern, that you don't need to imitate to innovate. And democracy is at the heart of that message. 1 billion citizens casting votes, holding leaders accountable, debating fiercely. That's not just governance. That's inspiration, and it's global. That kind of democratic model can influence other emerging nations to chart their own path without bending to Western models. That scares Trump, because his politics feeds off the idea that there is only one way to lead, and that way comes from him. And it goes deeper than just politics. Trump thrives on binary narrative, us vs them, strong vs weak, winners vs losers. But India doesn't fit neatly into those boxes. It's a country of paradoxes, of simultaneous truths, and that's where its strength lies. It can be ancient and futuristic, chaotic and calculated, spiritual and scientific, all at once. That throws off someone who only sees the world in black and white. Trump fears what he can't label, what he can't simplify, what he can't co-opt. You see, when a democracy grows strong without needing validation from the West, it becomes a mirror. And when Trump looks into that mirror, he doesn't see a reflection of his kind of power. He sees a challenge to it. He sees a nation that doesn't need to shout to be heard, one that rises without echoing his voice, and deep down, that makes him nervous, because in India's democratic rise, he sees something he can't dominate, can't define, and certainly can't ignore. Leadership, real leadership, it's not just about volume or visibility. It's not about who yells the loudest or who gets the most headlines. It's about influence. It's about respect. And more than anything, it's about how quietly and consistently you move the world forward without demanding the spotlight. Now, Donald Trump is a man who craves the spotlight. He measures strength in applause, ratings, and reactions. So imagine his discomfort when he looks across the globe and sees India rising, not with bluster, but with balance, not by trying to replace America, but by redefining what leadership even looks like in this new century. And that rise, that quiet, steady, self-assured rise, that's what he fears most. You see, the traditional image of power, especially in the eyes of someone like Trump, is loud, individualistic, and often unilateral. It's about dominating conversations, issuing ultimatums, and standing solo on stage. But the kind of leadership India is cultivating doesn't follow that formula. It's collaborative. It's rooted in history, but focused on the future. It's about building bridges across continents, whether it's through the global south, climate negotiations, trade forums, or multilateral summits. And that's the kind of leadership that doesn't crash into a room. It changes the air inside it. India's growing global stature is not based on intimidation or manipulation. It's based on diplomacy, consistency, and presence. It shows up, listens, negotiates, and often becomes the voice of reason in an increasingly polarized world. And that presence has power. When India speaks at the G20 or UN, it brings the weight of 1/6 of humanity. It doesn't need theatrics to matter. That kind of steady, dignified leadership, it unsettles Trump, because it reminds him that influence isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent, sometimes it's patient, but it always leaves an impact. Think about this. Trump often tried to lead by division, pitting allies against each other, tearing up agreements, turning cooperation into competition. He saw leadership as a solo performance, but India's leadership works differently. It builds partnerships. It mediates when others escalate, whether it's balancing relations with the U.S. and Russia, engaging China while protecting sovereignty, or deepening ties with Africa, ASEAN, and the Middle East. India navigates complexity without making enemies at every turn. That kind of mature statecraft throws off someone like Trump, who is used to transactional deals and televised declarations. And let's not forget soft power culture, diaspora, education, spirituality, cinema, cuisine, technology. Indian influence isn't just in boardrooms or on battlefields. It's in minds. It's in communities across the globe, from Silicon Valley to South Africa, from Bollywood to yoga, from academic institutions to startups. The Indian identity is everywhere, and it's embraced. That kind of cultural leadership doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock its already inside. And for Trump, who equates power with control, that kind of quiet ubiquity feels like a threat. Because you can't campaign against it, you can't tweet it away, you can't ban it with a policy. It's already working, already shaping, already influencing, and maybe that's the heart of it. Trump is used to leadership being about dominance. But India is showing that leadership in the modern world is about relevance. It's about showing up with dignity, speaking with purpose, and leading not just with ambition, but with vision. And when you lead like that, you don't need validation. You don't even need permission. You just keep rising,